So if you take a single gear out of like a high-end tourbillon watch, you can sit there and analyze its physical properties all day long.
Right, you can measure the teeth, weigh the metal, all of that.
Exactly. I mean, you can categorize the exact alloy it's made of. But looking at that one static piece of metal is going to tell you absolutely nothing about the actual kinetic tension of the spring or, the invisible forces that actually keep the whole mechanism ticking.
Yeah, because a static analysis completely ignores the environment of constant pressure that the gear needs to even function. I mean, isolated, it's just a piece of metal, but put it under tension, and it's suddenly an engine of reality.
And that is exactly the lens we are applying today to our deep dive. Welcome in, by the way. Today we are exploring the actual mechanics of existence for you. We've got an amazing source text, an excerpt from Moshe Chaim Luzato's Klach, Pitchei, Chochma, specifically chapter 16.
Yeah, it's a deeply profound Kabbalistic text, and we're using the translation and explanation by Avraham Greenbaum, which is incredibly helpful for unpacking this.
It really is. So our mission today is to look past the usual static categorization of the Sephirah, those divine emanations, and decode the actual kinetic energy that drives the whole system.
Yeah.
Specifically, we're looking at how they shine with two very distinct kinds of direct and returning light.
Right. And Luzzatto is incredibly ambitious in this chapter. He basically outlines two distinct modalities for these lights. The first one deals with the macro level, what he calls the governmental order, or the whole cycle of existence.
Okay, the big picture.
Exactly. And the second one dictates the micro level, the developmental chain, or hishtalshalut, which is how the individual levels of existence are actually formed. Both are in constant motion, but they serve completely different structural purposes.
Okay, I want to start with that first one, the macro-level governmental order. Because Luzzatto anchors this whole concept in a really specific visual from Ezekiel's prophetic vision. He describes the Sephirah operating like the appearance of lightning.
Yeah, it's a very striking image, literally.
Right. But I'm struggling a bit to visualize the physics of this metaphor. Because when I think of lightning, I think of a discharge from the sky hitting the ground. Are we just talking about energy moving downward through this system?
Well, no, that's where the metaphor gets really interesting. The text isn't just focusing on the downward strike. It's actually emphasizing the instantaneous loop.
A loop.
Yeah. If you look at a lightning flash closely, in a fraction of a second, it appears to strike the ground and then immediately reflect right back upward to the cloud. Luzzatto uses this to describe a blinding, continuous cycle in the Sephirah.
Okay, that's it goes down.
It moves level by level from the highest point, Keter, which means crown, all the way down the sequence to the lowest point, Malshut, or kingship. But here's the catch. When it hits Malshut, it doesn't just stop.
It bounces back.
Exactly. Malshut instantly inverts and becomes the Keter of the ascending return. It just reverses the whole sequence.
Wow, okay. I'm trying to map the topology of that in my head. Because if Malshut becomes Keter on the rebound, we aren't just talking about a ladder where energy goes up and down the rungs. We're talking about a system that almost like folds in on itself.
As spatial folding is precisely what the text is getting at, yeah.
It's kind of like, imagine I throw a ball in a room made entirely of perfect mirrors.
Oh, I like that.
Right.
Huh.
The furthest point of impact is simultaneously the exact origin point of the reflection. It's like a boomerang. The end of the trajectory is completely inextricably linked to the beginning of the return.
That's a perfect analogy. The furthest emanation is just the launch pad for the return journey. So what was the bottom, Malshut, becomes the top, Keter, and the entire internal hierarchy realigns for the ascent.
Okay, but logically, what does that actually accomplish? If this governmental order is supposed to orchestrate reality, a constant boomerang effect just seems kind of redundant to me. Like if Ein Sof the incident is already absolute, why does the energy need to constantly bounce back? What does that prove?
Well, the redundancy is kind of the whole point. The loop proves total encompassment.
Encompassment.
Yeah, so Luzzatto is addressing a potential theological trap here. People might think that as these emanations descend and get more restricted, they somehow slip out of the absolute control of the infinite, but the lightning flash proves that the Sephirah are entirely encompassed by Ein Sof from above and from below.
Oh, I see. So the bottom of the system is just as saturated by the infinite as the very top.
Exactly. The text actually quotes the prophet Isaiah here, "I am first and I am last." The infinite is revealed at the end of the cycle in the exact same way as at the beginning. Malshut isn't a dead end.
It's a barrier.
Right, it's the barrier where the energy encounters the infinite from below and is just forced right back up. It proves the system is this airtight, perfect loop.
Okay, that brings up a pretty massive structural problem, I think.
Yeah.
Well, if the system is this perfectly encompassed loop, where the infinite is in total control at both ends, why introduce the concealment, the Zimtzum, in the first place?
Yeah.
I mean, the text looks at the grand cosmic timeline here, right? The concealment and the eventual revelation.
Yeah, the macro timeline.
But if the end goal is just to reveal the perfection that was already there before the Zimtzum, the whole cycle just feels like a giant cosmic game of hide and seek, like a zero-sum game.
That is the central paradox of this whole governmental order. But Luzzatto doesn't view the Zimtzums as just like arbitrarily hiding things. He views it as the necessary condition for a very specific type of revelation.
Okay, go on.
See, before the concealment, the perfection of Ein Sof was just simple, undifferentiated light. There were absolutely no boundaries. And because there were no boundaries, no discrete individual existence could interact with it.
Right, it was just a blinding singularity.
And a singularity can't support a relationship or a structure. So the concealment creates the arena for this whole governmental order to happen. And this is where Luzzatto introduces a really mind-bending metric for how we measure progress in that arena.
Well, this is the paradox of distance, right, between Keter and Malshet.
Exactly. So let's look at how Luzzatto measures distance here. If you measure chronologically from the exact moment of the initial concealment, Keter is the very first emanation. It's step one. And Malshet is the final step at the bottom.
Right, that's your standard top-down descent. Makes total sense.
But Luzzatto argues that if you measure by the ultimate end goal, which is having the perfection fully revealed, the math totally inverts.
Wait, how does it invert?
Because Keter, which is chronologically the closest to the initial concealment, is actually the furthest away from the ultimate goal of full revelation, whereas Malshet, the lowest point of the descent, is structurally the closest to the finish line. So the descent of the worlds is actually their ascent toward the goal.
Okay, let me try to map this out for you guys listening, because it sounds totally counterintuitive. Think of it like building a massive skyscraper.
Okay, I'm with you.
If the end goal is to stand on the finished roof and look over the city, laying the concrete foundation is chronologically your first step.
Right.
But physically, spatially, that foundation is the absolute furthest you will ever be from completing the roof. You literally have to move away from the starting line to get to the finish line.
That is a brilliant analogy. Sinking deeper into the structural complexity, laying those foundation levels, is the only actual mechanism for climbing toward the ultimate goal.
I mean, I'm tracking the architecture of it, but I still kind of struggle with the underlying philosophy. Because Luzzatto says the goal is that the perfection, which was initially hidden, is now fully revealed and standing.
Right, standing is a key word there.
But what does standing add to the equation? I mean, if you have simple infinite perfection, why does it matter if it can stand on its own in a restricted framework? Isn't that assigning a very, human need for validation to the infinite?
It's not really about validation. It's more about the ontological weight of existence. Like undifferentiated light just is. It doesn't have structure.
It's just everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But by forcing the light through the Zimtzum, through that concealment and the boundaries, the perfection is subjected to restriction. So when that perfection is fully revealed at the end of the whole cycle, it's no longer just simple light. It is a resilient, structured perfection that has incorporated the boundaries without being diminished by them.
So the resistance of the concealment is what actually tempers the light. It proves that the infinite can maintain absolute control even when it's operating through these finite fragmented systems.
Exactly. The system earns its existence. The perfection validates itself by overcoming the very concealment that was meant to hide it. And that is the whole macro-level purpose of that first type of light.
The overarching narrative. Wow. Okay, so that naturally forces us to ask how those finite fragmented systems are actually built in the first place, right? Which brings us to part 2 of our mission.
Yes, this is where Luzzatto shifts from the macro-governmental cycle to the micro-mechanics, what he calls Histalschalut, or the developmental chain.
How the individual floors of that skyscraper are actually constructed.
Exactly. And the text lays down a hard rule here for this second kind of light. No light accomplishes its purpose until it emerges from its source and then returns to its source.
Okay, so it has to retreat.
Yes. This governs the actual genesis of any discrete level. We're zooming in from the continuous lightning flash loop to a specific creative act. When a new level or a branch needs to be formed, Luzzatto says a root light descends faultlessly and without hindrance. It's a massive concentrated projection of Ein Sof.
It descends with infinite potential. But Luzzatto creates a hard boundary here that really caught my eye. He says the new level is absolutely not formed during that downward trajectory,
No, it's not.
which is wild.
Mhm.
If the descending light is the raw power of the infinite, why can't it just construct the new level on its way down?
Well, because the raw power of the infinite cannot, by definition, establish a finite boundary. If that unmitigated root light just stayed in that space, it would completely overwhelm any potential for a limited existence.
Because you can't have the finite coexisting with the fully manifest infinite.
Right, the boundary would just dissolve instantly. It would be blown away, therefore the great light has to retreat. It must ascend back to its source.
Okay, so the withdrawal itself is actually the generative act.
Yes,
Let's
exactly.
look at the thermodynamics of this for a second.
Yeah.
Imagine a massive, like, million-volt lightning strike hitting a sandy beach.
Okay.
The plasma channel descends with totally faultless power, and it strikes the sand. But if the plasma just stays there, it just continually vaporizes the environment. There's no structure, just destruction.
Right, it's too powerful.
Right, the lightning has to dissipate. It has to return to the atmosphere.
Yeah.
But as it withdraws, the intense thermal energy it leaves behind fuses the sand into a permanent hollow glass tube, a fulgurite.
Oh, wow. The fulgurite is an absolutely perfect model for what Luzzatto calls the reshimu.
The rishimu.
Yeah, the trace or the residue left behind by the light.
Because the glass structure is not the lightning itself.
Mm.
The lightning is completely gone. The glass is just the permanent footprint of the lightning's departure. So the branch is formed in the cooling off period, in the aftermath of the withdrawal.
Exactly. Luzzatto is incredibly explicit about this. The limited light that's suited for that specific new level takes on its independent existence only after the great light retreats. The reshimu, that footprint, is the capacity of the space to hold on to a finite memory of the infinite light that passed through it.
Wow.
If the great light doesn't get out of the way, the reshimu can never solidify into a permanent branch.
This is so profound. It implies that every single level of reality, every branch in this whole developmental chain, is inherently a structure built out of absence.
Yes.
Like the finite world is just an intricate network of glass cubes left behind by departing light.
Built out of absence. That's a beautiful way to phrase it. And that absence establishes a fundamental asymmetry in the universe, which actually leads to the most critical dynamic in this entire chapter.
Which is?
Because the root light ascended and left the branch behind, a permanent state of tension is introduced into the whole system.
Right, because now that we have these permanent structures, these branches
Well, yeah.
just sit there statically.
Not at all. The text explicitly states the branch pursues its source after the source's ascent.
Pursues its source.
Yes. The branch and the root don't hold equal weight. They are permanently separated by that initial withdrawal we talked about. So the branch is continually trying to close that gap. The reshimu possesses this, like, ontological memory of the great light that formed.
Oh, I love that. Ontological memory.
Its inherent nature isn't just to remain static. Its core property is an active structural yearning to reintegrate with its root. And this pursuit is actually what maintains the integrity of the whole developmental chain. It's the bond of existence.
Wait, but does this mean the developmental chain is inherently unstable?
What do you mean?
Well, if every single level is constantly straining upward, trying to reintegrate with a source that deliberately retreated, isn't reality just in a state of perpetual structural failure? Because, we usually conceptualize the universe as this very stable top-down hierarchy where gravity just holds everything in its proper static place.
Yeah, but we need to redefine stability here. Luzzatto isn't describing a static shelf where objects just sit peacefully. He's describing a dynamic equilibrium.
Dynamic equilibrium.
Think of an orbit in space. A satellite stays in orbit precisely because it is constantly falling toward the planet while moving forward. The tension of gravity and momentum is what actually creates the stability.
Okay.
In this Kabbalistic framework, the downward projection of the trace combined with the upward pursuit by the branch creates the structural bond of existence.
The tension is the connection.
Exactly. If the branch ever stopped pursuing the root, the bond would sever entirely and the level would just cease to exist. The system absolutely requires that lack. It requires that distance.
That completely reframes the mechanics of reality, Fnei. It means gravity isn't just a downward force from the infinite dictating terms to us finite beings. The structural integrity of the universe is actively maintained from the bottom up. The branches are holding the universe together through their yearning for the root.
Yes. The macro-governmental cycle ensures that the big overarching plan of revelation is executed. But the micro-developmental chain ensures that every individual component within that plan is dynamically tethered to the infinite through its own inherent yearning.
It is an incredibly sophisticated model of reality. I mean, let's just recap this for a second because it's huge.
Let's do it.
We have this continuous lightning-fast loop of the macro system that proves the airtight control of Ein Sof, from Keter to Malchet and back again. And then, nested right within that, we have the micromechanics, where raw infinite power strikes, withdraws, and leaves behind these finite branches that are structurally compelled to pursue the source that abandoned them.
It creates a reality that is both absolutely determined by the infinite and at the same time intensely active on the part of the finite.
Which leaves us with a totally fascinating ontological problem to consider.
Okay, lay it on me.
So we know the macro-governmental order has an end goal, right? The ultimate phase where the perfection of Ein Sof is fully revealed and standing on its own, having overcome the concealment.
That's right, the culmination of the cycle.
But if the micro level of reality, like the very existence of us finite branches, is entirely dependent on the lack of that infinite light and on the tension of pursuing a source that has retreated, what happens to the physics of existence when that overarching cycle completes?
Oh, wow.
Right. If ultimate revelation means the infinite light fills the system again, does the tension just resolve? And if the tension resolves, if the branch finally catches the root, does the whole structure of reality just dissolve back into simple light?
That is the ultimate question.
Or does Luzato's model imply that at the end of the governmental order, reality evolves into some completely new, unimaginable state of physics, where finite boundaries and infinite revelation can somehow coexist without tension?
Well, I'll leave you with one final thought to mull over regarding that tension. If every single level of existence is essentially a trace left behind by a departing light, and its core nature is to pursue the source that left it, how might that change the way we view our own human feelings of lack or distance or yearning?
Oh, that's heavy.
Because perhaps, in the framework of this text, feeling distant from the source isn't a flaw in your system. It is the exact mechanism that binds the entire universe together.
Yearning isn't a bug, it's a feature. Something for you to dissect as you look at the mechanics of your own reality today. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and we'll see you next time.